I came to his house with 2 suitcases, 14 jars of pickled cucumbers, and a geranium named Gerald. Anton said the geranium wouldn't work. I said, understood. 3 months later, his clients were photographing my mushrooms and asking for my contact information. My name is Valentine Roots. I'm 63 years old, retired agronomist, widow, and, according to my son's architecture magazine, an unexpected intervention in sterile domestic space. I didn't know that's what I was. I thought I was just his mother. Let me tell you how it started. It started with a light fixture. $12,000, hand-blown glass, imported from a studio in Copenhagen. It hung in Anton's living room like a large, expensive jellyfish. On a Tuesday in October, I hung mushrooms on it. Not decoratively, practically. The air circulation near the ceiling was excellent. I had checked with a piece of ribbon the week before, the way you check airflow in a greenhouse. The mushrooms needed 3 days. The ribbon confirmed it was the right spot. Anton walked in with 2 clients at 4:17 in the afternoon. I heard the door. I was writing in my notebook by the window, tracking the drying rate because porcini and birch boletes behave differently in indoor conditions, and this was useful data. The clients stopped walking. Anton stopped walking. Mom, what is this? I didn't turn around right away. I finished writing the number. Porcini and birch boletes. You asked me not to bring porcini. I brought birch boletes. They smell softer. On the light fixture. The airflow there is excellent. You told me yourself. The house breathes. One of the clients, the one in the linen jacket, slowly reached for his phone. Is this an installation? I turned, looked at him, then at the light fixture, then back at him. No, it's food. Anton closed his eyes. My name is Valentine Roots. I am 63 years old, a retired agronomist from Beaverton, Oregon. I spent 31 years making things grow in difficult soil. I thought that was my most useful skill. Turns out my second most useful skill is existing inside a minimalist house in Portland. I didn't plan any of it. I want to be honest about that. I'm going to tell you how we got here, Anton, his wife Karina, and me, and you can decide for yourself who was wrong. I'm not sure I know. My house in Beaverton had a particular smell: dill, wood, old cotton, and something underneath all of it that I could never name, but that meant home. I'd lived there for 26 years. The kitchen window faced east, which meant I had good morning light for seedlings in March. The back porch had a hook where I hung garlic in September. The hook was important. I'd installed it myself, which at the time felt like a small victory, and in retrospect, feels like the beginning of a philosophy. I grew tomatoes, cucumbers, 3 varieties of squash, dill, parsley, tarragon, 2 kinds of basil, and a lavender plant that had been refusing to die for 11 years, despite my best efforts to neglect it. I had 43 jars of preserved things in the cellar. I had a cat named Soil who had come with the house, or rather, who had decided the house was his and I was an acceptable roommate. I had a chair by the window. I had Gerald, the geranium, on the sill. I had a routine. Anton called on a Thursday in July. Mom, I finished the house. Which house? My house, the one I've been building for 2 years. Mom, I've told you about this. He had told me about this. I had listened, though some of the details had not stayed with me. I remembered Portland, glass, something about negative space. I had nodded on the phone the way you nod when someone explains a recipe you will never make. It's beautiful, he said. I want you to see it. I'll come visit. I was thinking, and Karina agrees, I was thinking you could come live with us. We have a room, it's good light, you'd have your own bathroom. I looked at the hook where the garlic would go in September. The garlic was still in the ground. Anton. Mom, you're alone there. Dad's been gone 4 years. The house is big. You shouldn't be. I'm fine. I know you're fine. I'm saying you could be better than fine. You could be with family. I thought about the hook. I thought about Soil, who at that moment was sitting on the windowsill next to Gerald, which he did every afternoon, and which he would continue doing whether I was there or not, because Soil had his own schedule, and it did not involve consulting me. Can I bring my cucumbers? A pause. Mom. I have 14 jars. I can't just leave them. Yes, bring the cucumbers. I found out later that he had said this without thinking, the way you say, of course, bring whatever you want, when you are not yet thinking concretely about what that means, when whatever you want is still an abstract concept and not 14 glass jars of preserved cucumbers standing in a row in a kitchen that cost more than my first car. But that was later. The house was on a quiet street in the Laurelhurst neighborhood, which Anton told me was one of Portland's most desirable areas. The houses on the street were old, craftsman bungalows mostly, with porches and flower beds, and the general look of places that had been lived in by actual humans for 100 years. Anton's house did not look like the other houses. It was low and horizontal, all glass and pale concrete, and it sat on the lot the way a statement sits in a conversation, deliberately, with the clear intention of being noticed. There were no curtains. There was a single birch tree in the front yard, planted in what appeared to be a perfectly calculated position. There was grass, but the kind of grass that looks like it has been individually placed. I stood on the sidewalk with my 2 suitcases, my geranium, and my box of cucumbers, and I looked at the house. It breathes, Anton said from beside me. He said it the way people say things they have rehearsed. The whole concept is about air and light, nothing extraneous, nothing that doesn't serve the space. Where do you hang the garlic? I asked. We don't hang garlic. Where do you keep it? In a drawer, a specific drawer. It's designed for that. I picked up my suitcases and walked toward the front door. Gerald was in my left hand. Gerald did not seem troubled by what he saw. The inside of the house was the color of winter. Not the winter I like, the kind with snow on the ground and something in the oven, but the abstract idea of winter. White walls, pale gray concrete floors, ceilings high enough to make you aware that you were in a space rather than a room. The furniture was the color of fog. Everything that was not furniture was either absent or hidden behind panels that looked like walls until you pressed them correctly and they opened. I pressed one by accident on my first evening. It was the refrigerator. The appliances are integrated, Karina said. She was standing in the kitchen watching me press things. She had the posture of someone who had spent time teaching herself good posture. Her hair was pulled back in a way that suggested effort presented as effortlessness. It takes some getting used to. Where's the window above the sink? I asked. There's no window above the sink. How do you see what you're washing? There's very good task lighting. I looked at the task lighting. It was good. It was also not a window. I'll adapt, I said. Karina smiled. It was a smile that meant something other than happiness, though I couldn't yet say exactly what. We're so glad you're here, Valentine. Anton talks about you constantly. Does he? You're very important to him. I know. Where should I put Gerald? The smile shifted slightly. Gerald? The geranium. Oh. She looked at Gerald the way people look at something they have already decided about. Maybe the guest room? There's a windowsill. Gerald went to the guest room windowsill. The windowsill faced northwest. I said nothing about this because I had been in the house for 40 minutes and I was trying to be reasonable. That night, I lay in the guest room, white and spare and clean and smelling of nothing at all, and I looked at the ceiling and thought, I can do this. It's different. Different is fine. I'm 63, not 93. I fell asleep. Gerald sat on the northwest-facing windowsill. In the morning, I found my 14 jars of cucumbers stacked neatly in the pantry behind a closed door. The first month, I was mostly quiet. This is my nature. I am not a person who fills silence with sound. In my years as an agronomist, I learned that the most important information comes when you stop talking and start watching. The color of a leaf, the angle of a stem, the way water sits on soil after rain. I applied this approach to the house. I watched. I took notes. Not literally, but the way you take notes in your mind when you understand that you are in a new environment and you do not yet have enough data. The house ran on rules, not written rules. Anton would have found that unsophisticated, but understood ones, the way good design is supposed to be understood without explanation. No objects on the concrete kitchen counter except the Italian coffee machine and a single bowl made of something that looked like stone. No items on the windowsills except the one plant Anton had bought specifically for the living room, a fiddle-leaf fig in a concrete pot, which I privately considered the saddest tree I had ever seen. No smells except the candle Karina burned in the evenings, which was called wet concrete and cost $120 and smelled, in my professional assessment, exactly like my cellar in Beaverton after rain. I mentioned this once. It smells like my cellar, I said. It's supposed to be evocative of raw materials, Karina said. It's from a very small studio in Brooklyn. My cellar is free. She looked at me. I looked at the candle. We reached a mutual understanding that this subject was closed. I tried to be useful. I made breakfast on the mornings I was up before them. Eggs, toast, fruit, the kind of breakfast that is breakfast. Karina would come downstairs and look at the pan on the stove the way architects look at load-bearing walls that have been painted an unexpected color, registering it, deciding not to address it today. You didn't have to do that, she would say. I was awake, I would say. We usually just have the green smoothie. I know. I made eggs also. She would eat the eggs. She always ate the eggs. But she would eat them quickly, standing at the counter, looking at her phone, as if eggs were a thing that happened to her rather than a thing she had chosen. Anton was easier in the mornings. He would sit down, put his coffee in front of him, and say, "Good morning, Mom," the way he had said it since he was 7 years old, with that slight upward inflection at the end of Mom that meant he was glad to see me even if the rest of his day was already complicated in his head. He was always glad to see me. I want to be clear about that. The difficulty was not that he didn't love me. The difficulty was the shape that love took when it collided with the house. It was 6 weeks in when he moved the chair. I had brought one piece of furniture, my reading chair from the Beaverton house. It was not beautiful by any standard I could name objectively. It was brown. It had arms that were slightly worn on the right side from 30 years of use, and it had a small permanent indentation in the seat cushion that was exactly the shape of me. I had put it in the corner of my room, which was where it fit. One morning I came downstairs to find it in the hallway, outside the door of the room, pushed against the wall. "Anton, my chair is in the hallway." Anton was at the kitchen counter with his coffee. He did not look up immediately. "I moved it, just temporarily. I had a client coming yesterday afternoon. I needed the sight line from the living room to read as unbroken. The chair was just visible around the doorframe if you stood at a certain angle. I wasn't in the chair. No, but the chair was there. I looked at him. He looked at his coffee. "Where would you like me to put it?" I asked. I was thinking, the shed has space, just for when clients come, which is not that often. And when clients are not coming? You can bring it back in. It's not heavy. I thought about this. I thought about it carefully, the way I used to think about soil composition reports when the numbers didn't add up. "Okay," I said. The chair went to the shed. Clients came twice a week. I did not bring the chair back in on the other days because I did not want to develop the habit of moving a chair back and forth across a yard, which seemed to me like a task that would, over time, do something to a person. Instead, that week, Anton came home with a gift. It was a rock. Not a small rock, a large, flat, smooth river stone, approximately the size of a dinner plate and the weight of a meaningful decision. He carried it in with both hands and set it on the floor in the corner of the living room. "It's for grounding," he said. "You put your hands on it. It's good for stress." "I'm not stressed." "It's good for relaxation then." "Anton, it's a rock. It's a meditation stone. It's from a supplier we use for landscape features. This is actually a premium piece. The grain on this is—" "Where's my chair?" A pause. Long enough. "Mom, the aesthetic of the house." "I know about the aesthetic. I live in it." "I thought you'd like the stone." I looked at the stone. The stone looked back at me with the expression of an object that has no opinions, which I respected. "Thank you for the stone," I said. I used it as a doorstop for my room. It was excellent for this purpose. The door had a tendency to swing closed in drafts, and the stone was heavy enough to hold it open reliably. Every morning when I opened my door and the stone held it, I thought, it is performing its function. The second month brought the herbs. I had a small collection, dried bundles I'd brought from Beaverton, nothing extravagant. Dill, tarragon, oregano, a particularly successful batch of thyme from last summer. I kept them in a paper bag in the pantry, which seemed reasonable. When I cooked, I used them. When I wasn't cooking, they stayed in the bag. This seemed like a neutral arrangement. It lasted until Karina had her friend Simone over for dinner. Simone was an interior designer. She was 31, wore her hair in a way that required specific products, and spoke about rooms the way people speak about patience, with authority and a certain affectionate despair. "Oh, Anton, it's exactly as you described. The restraint in here is really extraordinary. It's so committed." "That's the intention," Anton said. "Every element is intentional. You can feel it. Nothing is accidental." She turned to look at the kitchen, then stopped. "What's in the pantry?" The pantry door was open. My herbs were visible, the paper bag having tipped sideways to reveal its contents. "That's my mother's," Anton said. Simone looked at the herbs. Then she looked at me, the way you look at something you have categorized. "Oh," she said, "how earthy." "They're herbs," I said. "I use them when I cook." "Of course," she smiled. It was a smile shaped exactly like Karina's. I wondered if there was a class. It's just interesting in a space this considered to have something so organic. Evening after Simone left, Karina came to find me in the kitchen. Valentine. She stood in the doorway with the expression of someone delivering a reasonable message they have rehearsed. Anton and I were talking. The smell of the herbs, it's a little strong for the downstairs. It affects the atmosphere. "Which herbs?" "All of them a little. It's It's not that they smell bad, it's just the atmosphere, I said. Right. Could you maybe keep them in your room? I moved the herbs to my room. That night, before I fell asleep, I noticed my room smelled very good. What happened with the abonnement, the membership, I should say, came at the end of the second month, and it came with the particular texture of a gift that is also an instruction. We were at dinner, a Sunday. Anton had made something from a cookbook that involved 4 components and a garnish that was more architectural than edible. The garnish was a single herb sprig placed at exactly the angle you would place it if you were taking a photograph of the dish rather than eating it. I did not say this. Mom, Anton said, in the tone of someone about to say something they consider kind, Karina and I were thinking, you've been here 2 months. We want you to feel settled, connected, you know? I feel settled, I said. We thought it might be good for you to have something to do, a community. He slid an envelope across the table. We got you a membership. The Portland Center for Urban Design and Landscape Arts. They have classes, lectures, a garden project. Urban design, I said. It's your kind of thing. Plants, landscape, and urban design. They combine them. It's very interesting. Karina was watching me with the expression she used when she was trying to determine whether the thing she expected to happen was going to happen. Thank you, I said. I put the envelope in my pocket. This is very thoughtful. She relaxed, slightly. We thought you'd like it, Anton said. I thought about the chair in the shed. I thought about the herbs in my room. I thought about the rock that was holding my door open, and the cucumber jars behind the closed pantry door, and the geranium on the northwest-facing windowsill where it was receiving insufficient light and was, by my assessment, becoming depressed. I'll go on Thursday, I said. I went on Thursday. The Portland Center for Urban Design and Landscape Arts occupied the second floor of a building on Burnside that smelled of coffee and ambition. The walls were covered with large photographs of rooftop gardens, community plots, guerrilla planting initiatives, and something called a bioswale that appeared to be a ditch filled with intentional weeds. The Thursday class was called Reclaiming the Urban Landscape, Interventionism and the Politics of Growth. I sat in the back row with my notebook. The lecturer was a woman of about 40 with very short hair and the energy of someone who has not slept enough and finds this personally interesting rather than unfortunate. Her name was Dr. Priya Mehta, and she began the class by asking us to consider what we meant when we said something didn't belong. She talked for 90 minutes. I took 11 pages of notes. She talked about guerrilla gardening, the practice of planting in spaces without permission, as a political act. She talked about how sterile environments create sterile thinking. She talked about the philosophical tradition of interventionism in art and design, and how the most powerful interventions were the ones that use the existing space's language against itself. She said, when the system gives you nothing to work with, you work with what you brought. I underlined this. She talked about foraging aesthetics, the idea, currently very popular in design circles, that found materials and natural objects carried more authentic beauty than manufactured ones. She talked about the reclaimed object as a statement. She showed a photograph of an art installation in Berlin that consisted of drying herbs hung from industrial scaffolding. It had been featured in 3 design magazines. It looked, I noted, very much like what I had been planning to do with Anton's light fixture. I did not know yet that I had been planning this. I found out in that moment. At the end of class, Dr. Mehta said, "The most radical act in an optimized space is to be genuinely, stubbornly, unambiguously alive in it." I closed my notebook. I had 31 years of experience being alive in difficult conditions. I was, I realized, professionally qualified. I want to be precise about what happened next, because I have told this story a few times now, and people tend to assume I had a plan. I did not have a plan. I had an approach, which is different. An approach is a way of the mushrooms. I had found them at the mushrooms. I had found them at the farmer's market on Saturday. Porcini and birch boletes, excellent quality, the kind you get when you know what to look for and the vendor hasn't displayed the best ones at the front. I bought 2 pounds. I brought them home. I stood in my room and looked at them and thought about airflow. My room had a northwest-facing window. The airflow in my room was, I had established over 2 months of observation, mediocre. There was a draft from under the door that complicated drying conditions, and the humidity was inconsistent because the concrete walls breathed in an irregular way that Anton considered a feature. The living room was different. The living room had high ceilings and consistent air movement from the ventilation system, which was one of the things Anton mentioned to clients when he walked them through. He was proud of the ventilation. "The air quality in here," he said, "is exceptional." I stood under the Copenhagen light fixture and held up a piece of ribbon. It moved evenly, steadily, in a direction that would distribute warm air across any hanging object. I found the ladder in the shed next to my chair. The light fixture had a horizontal bar on the lower curve, which the designer had apparently included as a visual element, a slight industrial reference, Anton had explained when he described the piece to me. The bar was excellent for hanging things. It could comfortably hold 4 or 5 bundles without crowding. I hung the mushrooms on a Tuesday. I was finished by 9 in the morning. Then I sat down with my notebook by the window, in the spot where the reading chair used to be, and I continued tracking the drying rate. At 4:17, Anton came home with clients, and we are back where we started. What I did not expect, and this I will admit freely, was the phone. The client in the linen jacket, the one who had asked if it was an installation, did not put his phone away. He took 4 photographs. Then he took a short video, walking slowly around the room, ending on the light fixture with the mushrooms, and then panning down to Gerald on the windowsill, who had been moved from the guest room to the living room that morning because I had decided the northwest-facing windowsill was contributing to his depression, and the living room, despite its design commitments, had better southeastern light in the afternoons. This is extraordinary. The tension between the organic and the architectural is just, and it's unironic. That's what makes it work. She's not trying to make a statement. "Excuse me, are you the one who did this?" "The mushrooms?" I said. "Yes." "Are you an artist?" "I'm an agronomist." He looked at me for a moment. Then he looked at Anton. Then he looked back at the mushrooms. "You know, this is actually extraordinary context for the house. The way the found object activates the space." Anton was standing near the kitchen doorway. He had the expression of a man watching something happen that he does not have the vocabulary to stop. "Thank you," he said. Can I share this?" The client was already typing. "I have a design blog, 40,000 followers. I want to write about the house. I'd want to include this." The mushrooms. "The whole thing. The geranium, the mushrooms, is that a stone used as a doorstop?" He had noticed the meditation stone, which was performing its function in the hallway. "It's a meditation stone," I said. "I use it for the door." He typed something in his phone, nodding. That evening, the photograph was on Instagram. The caption said, "Visited a private residence in Portland today and found the most unexpected, beautiful thing. An intervention by the homeowner's mother, an Oregon agronomist, using the architecture's own logic against it. The mushrooms drying on a Frederickson pendant, the geranium in southeastern light, the meditation stone as doorstop. It is the most honest thing I have seen in a designed space in years. Find me a hotel that does this. Find me an architect brave enough to commission this. Tag someone who lives like this. Hashtag interventionism. Hashtag living architecture. Hashtag PDX. Hashtag foraging." By morning, it had 412 likes. By the following Tuesday, it had passed 700. I found out about this from Dr. Mehta, who sent me an email to my class account that said, "Valentine, I think you should know what you've done. I showed the post to my research group. We'd like to interview you." I read the email twice. Then I forwarded it to Anton. He did not respond for 6 hours. When he did respond, he knocked on my door at 10 in the evening. I was reading. He sat down on the edge of the bed, the reading chair not being available, and looked at his hands for a moment. "Mom, I know," I said. "I'm not sure you do. You're upset about the Instagram." "I'm not upset about the Instagram." A pause. "I'm upset about the mushrooms. The Instagram is... I don't know what the Instagram is yet, but the mushrooms... They're done drying. I took them down this afternoon." "That's not the point." "I know it's not the point." We sat with this for a moment. Outside, the birch tree in the calculated position was moving in what I had determined was a consistent westerly evening wind. I had been tracking this as well, though I had not told Anton. "The clients liked it," he said. This cost him something to say. I could hear it. "I know." "That doesn't mean it's not... The house isn't supposed to be about..." "Anton," I set down my book. "Do you remember when you were 9 and you built that birdhouse?" "What does that?" "You used my good kitchen shears to cut the wood. I was furious. And then the birds came and you were so pleased with yourself. And I thought, he ruined my shears and I'm looking at a child who built something real." I picked up my book again. "That's how I feel right now." He looked at the wall, then at his hands, then, briefly, at Gerald, who was on the nightstand because I had moved him from the living room back to the bedroom after the Instagram incident, not wanting him involved in anything he hadn't agreed to. "What are you going to say to the researcher?" he asked. "I don't know yet. Probably the truth." "Which is?" "That I needed to dry the mushrooms and the airflow was good." He made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Get some sleep," I said. He got up. At the door, he stopped. "Karina wants to talk to you tomorrow." "I'll be here," I said. Karina's version of talking was more structured than Anton's. She came to find me in the kitchen the next morning while I was making breakfast, stood in the doorway with her coffee, and said, "Valentine, I want to be direct with you." "Please," I said. "Anton has clients coming on Friday, important ones. A couple from Seattle, significant budget, the kind of project that would be on the cover of a regional magazine. He's been working toward this for 2 years." "I know, he mentioned it." "I want the house to look the way it's supposed to look on Friday." "Of course." "Which means, and I want to say this kindly, I need you to be in your room Friday afternoon, from 2 until 5. I turned from the stove. I looked at her. "In my room." "Just for those 3 hours. You can have the kitchen in the morning, obviously, and the evening is completely..." "Karina, this is also my home." The word landed in the kitchen the way certain seeds land, quietly, but with the implication of eventual growth. I know that, of course. She adjusted her grip on the coffee mug. I'm just asking for 3 hours. What would you like me to do in my room for 3 hours? Read, rest, whatever you normally do. I thought about what I normally did. I thought about the farmer's market, which was on Saturday. I thought about the Thursday class where Dr. Mehta had asked me to speak next week to the full cohort about the agronomist's approach to found environments. I thought about the 43 jars in the pantry and the herbs on my nightstand and Gerald's improving condition in the southeastern afternoon light. All right, I said. Friday, 2 until 5. She nodded. She looked relieved. It was the look of a woman who has achieved a small, tactical objective and has not yet thought about what comes next. What came next was the garden. It had started simply enough. After the Thursday class, the week after the mushroom incident, Dr. Mehta had given me a packet of reading material about guerrilla gardening. She had given it, I believe, as a kind of philosophical provocation, an invitation to think about the ideas. She had not anticipated that I would read it as an instruction manual, because she did not know about the front lawn. The front lawn of Anton's house was, like the grass, individually placed. It was a specific variety, fine fescue, I had identified it, that was maintained at exactly 2.5 inches by a service that came every Thursday. It had no weeds because the service also applied something quarterly that ensured no weeds would be impolite enough to appear. It was a very good lawn. It was also, by any practical measure, useless. I had 43 containers, some with the ceramic pots I'd brought from Beaverton, some were things I'd found at the Saturday market, and some were, and I want to be accurate, old bathroom fixtures that a salvage company on Powell Boulevard had been selling very cheaply. Porcelain, durable, excellent drainage once you drilled the holes, which I did in the shed on a Wednesday morning while Anton was at his office. 37 containers went onto the front lawn in a pattern that Dr. Mehta's reading material would have described as organic clustering, and that I would describe as where the sun was good. I planted them with what I had, nettles from a plant I'd been growing in my room, which had excellent medicinal properties and which I had not told anyone about, plus chamomile, lemon balm, echinacea, and a very robust oregano that had been waiting in a pot on my windowsill for 3 weeks. I finished at 11 in the morning. By noon, a neighbor had stopped on the sidewalk to look. By 1:30, 2 neighbors. At 2:45, a woman with a stroller asked me what the plants were. Medicinal garden, I said. Nettles for iron, chamomile for sleep, echinacea for immunity. Did your son design this? I did. It's incredible. Is he going to incorporate it into the design of the house? Or is this more of a contrast element? I'm still deciding, I said. Anton came home at 6. He stood on the sidewalk for a long time. Mom, what? Medicinal garden. The soil here has good drainage. It's the slope. I checked the pH last week with the kit from the hardware store. It's slightly acidic, which is actually ideal for... There are old toilets on my lawn. They're salvage porcelain containers. They have excellent drainage. They're toilets, Mom. They were toilets. Now they're planters. I considered. That's actually a good metaphor for something, but I'm not sure what. He went inside. He came back out. He walked around the perimeter of the garden. He crouched down and looked at the nettles. These are medicinal? Yes. Which one helps with, I don't know, stress? The chamomile, second container from the left. He looked at the chamomile. He looked at the container, which had in fact been a toilet at some point. I'm going to get a call from the neighborhood association. Probably, I said. I can speak to them if you'd like. I have materials from the class. He went back inside. The next morning, there were 5 people on the sidewalk. One of them was a woman from Sunset Magazine who had seen the Instagram post and was, she said, following the story. That was when Karina stopped being background. She found me after the Sunset Magazine woman left, found me in the kitchen with my notebook, writing up the morning's observations about the containers and the drainage, and she sat down across from me in a way that meant this was not going to be a quick conversation. Valentine, I need you to understand something. I'm listening. We are trying to build a reputation. Anton has been working for 8 years to establish himself in this market. The house, this house, is his best argument for who he is as an architect. Every client that comes here is making a decision based on what they see. And what they're seeing now is, she paused, finding the word, modified. Expanded, I said. I'm not going to argue vocabulary with you. I'm not arguing. I'm offering an alternative. Karina put her hands flat on the table. She was wearing her rings. I noticed her rings for the first time. 2 of them, small and architectural, the kind of rings that were chosen for how they looked, not how they felt. He said temporarily, I said. She looked up. The first week. He was talking to you about the house, about clients. He said I was here temporarily. I heard it through the wall. The kitchen was very quiet. The coffee machine made a sound. Valentine. I'm not angry. This was true. I'm just telling you I know where we stand, and I think it's better to know where you stand. You can build on that. She looked at her rings, then at me. What do you want? My chair, I said, and proper light for Gerald, and I want to stop being in my room on client days. She breathed out slowly. And the garden? The garden, I said, is not going anywhere. The chamomile is establishing. The Friday clients, the Seattle couple, came as planned. I was not in my room. I was in the garden, because the garden required morning attention, and I had finished before 2 o'clock and then simply did not go inside, because the afternoon light was good, and I was reading on the porch chair, my reading chair from the shed, which I had moved to the porch 3 days earlier on the grounds that the porch was not technically inside the house and therefore did not affect the interior aesthetic. I heard Anton's voice as he brought them around the side of the house. He was explaining something about the relationship of the structure to the lot. I had heard this explanation before, the way the house negotiates with the landscape rather than imposing on it. They came around the corner and stopped. The Seattle couple were perhaps 50, both in the careful clothes of people with money who have decided not to look like people with money. She had the kind of sunglasses that cost as much as a refrigerator. He was looking at the garden the way a man looks at something that has reorganized his expectations. Anton, is this intentional? It's, my mother, the salvage containers. She was walking toward the garden, slowly, with the focused attention of someone shopping. Where did you source these? Powell Boulevard, I said. Salvage warehouse, $40 each. The porcelain retains heat, which is good for the root systems in the fall. She looked at me, then at Anton. Is your mother an artist? She's an agronomist, Anton said, for the third time in recent weeks with increasing acceptance, as though he was practicing the word and finding it worked better each time. Darling, I want this. Not the version of it. I want this specifically. Can we talk to her? Her husband was photographing the nettle bed. We have a property in Woodinville, she said to me. 5 acres. We've been talking about the grounds for 2 years and nothing has felt right. Everything proposed has felt, Anton's been wonderful, but the grounds, what's the soil like? I asked. I have no idea. Find out the pH and the drainage. Those are the 2 questions. She took out her phone and began taking notes. I looked at Anton. He was looking at the salvaged toilet planters. His expression was the expression of a man who has been working for 8 years to establish a reputation and has just discovered that it may be arriving from an unexpected direction. He caught my eye. I raised my eyebrows slightly. He made a small movement with his head that was not quite a nod and not quite a resignation, but somewhere in between. The kind of acknowledgement that requires processing before it becomes anything more specific. The beekeeping suit came later, and I want to be fair about how it happened. Dr. Mehta had invited me to speak to her full Thursday cohort, and the subject, as she had framed it, was the embodied practice of interventionism. I had asked what I should bring, and she said, "Whatever represents your approach." I thought about what represented my approach and concluded, protective equipment for working with living things. I had ordered the suit in September when I had briefly considered installing a small hive in the Beaverton backyard. The suit had arrived the week I moved and had lived in its box in the shed. I wore it to the Thursday class. It seemed accurate. The following Thursday, I walked 15 graduate students through the medicinal garden in the beekeeping suit and explained the properties of each plant, the soil composition, the sourcing of the containers, and the relationship between the house's ventilation system and the interior drying conditions. Anton came home at 4:45. There were 15 graduate students on his lawn. I was in the beekeeping suit explaining the chamomile. He stood on the sidewalk for a long moment. Then he walked up the path to the porch, unlocked the front door, and went inside. I finished the class. When the students left, I found Anton in the kitchen, sitting at the counter with his coffee, looking at his laptop. The Seattle clients confirmed, he said, without looking up. They want a consultation for the Woodinville property. They specifically requested you be present. Present for what? For the grounds consultation. They want to talk to you about the soil. I sat down across from him. I was still in the beekeeping suit, which I acknowledge is an unusual choice for a kitchen conversation, but it had been a long afternoon. Mom. Yes. The Instagram thing. He turned the laptop toward me. The post had 1,100 likes. Comments from design publications, a landscape architect in London, a verified account that described itself as a foraging correspondent. This wasn't what I planned for. I know. I've been fielding calls from 2 magazines. They want to do something about the house, including, they specifically mentioned the garden. That's good. It's not bad. He looked at the beekeeping suit. It's just not what I designed. Anton, I waited until he was looking at me. You designed a house that breathes. You said that yourself. You put in a ventilation system that creates excellent airflow. You planted a birch tree exactly where the morning light would hit it. You made spaces where things could happen. I meant specific things. I know what you meant. He looked at the number on the screen. The Woodinville property is $3.2 million, he said. If they engage us for the grounds as well as the house, I charge separately, I said. A pause. You charge. I'm a professional, Anton. 31 years of experience. I stood up. I want my chair back in my room. The cucumbers in the kitchen, not behind a door. And Gerald stays in the living room. The cucumbers smell. They smell like food. That's what they are. Karina's not going to like the cucumbers. Karina ate my eggs every morning for 3 months while standing over the sink looking at her phone. She likes more than she admits. Something shifted in his face. Not a smile, more the precondition of one. Fine, the cucumbers can be in the kitchen. Thank you. But on the shelf, not the counter. Of course. He nodded. I went toward the hallway. At the door, I stopped. The Woodinville consultation. I want to see the soil reports first, and the drainage. I'll get them. Good. I went down the hall. Tell Karina dinner is at 7. I'm making something that requires dill. I heard him exhale behind me. It was the exhale of a man deciding to be, eventually, all right with things. The magazine ran the piece in February. The headline was, Living Architecture, How One Oregon Agronomist Accidentally Became the Most Talked About Design Intervention in Portland. The photographs showed the house, Anton's house, the clean lines, the glass, the pale concrete, and the garden, and the living room with Gerald in the southeastern afternoon light, and the kitchen with the cucumbers on the shelf. They did not show the meditation stone, which was still holding my door open, performing its function, as it had done for 4 months without complaint or acknowledgement, which I found admirable. Anton's studio received 11 inquiries in the 2 weeks after the piece ran. 3 of them specifically mentioned the organic element and asked if it was available as a design service. He called me into the kitchen on a Thursday evening and showed me the emails. So, he set the phone face down on the counter. What do you want to do? About what? About this, about the consultations, about... I want to finish the Woodinville project. The soil reports came back. The drainage is poor on the east side. They'll need raised beds. And the pH is wrong for what she said she wanted, so we'll need to amend before planting. He looked at me. And after that? I thought about this. I thought about the Beaverton house, which I had not sold, which was sitting empty with the garlic hook and the east-facing kitchen window and the cat door I'd installed for Soil, who had in fact come with me to Portland and had adapted to the concrete floors with a pragmatism I respected. After that, we'll see, I said. I have a class on Tuesday. Dr. Mehta wants me to co-teach in the spring. Co-teach? Interventionism in domestic spaces. She thinks my methodology is worth formalizing. He picked up his phone, set it down again, picked it up. Mom? Yes? I'm sorry about the chair. I looked at him. He was looking at the counter, at the spot where the cucumbers were not, because the cucumbers were on the shelf now where they belonged. I know you are, I said. And about temporarily. I know. It wasn't Anton. I put my hand on the counter, near his, not on his. I am not a woman who makes large gestures about small things, and this was a small thing in the way that only small things can be large. The house is excellent. You built something real. The ventilation is very good. He looked up. I know, he said. Gerald is doing well, I said. The southeastern light is working. Good. And the chamomile is ready. I'll dry some this weekend. I moved toward the stove. The airflow in the living room is still the best in the house. He watched me for a moment. Don't touch the light fixture. I'll use the kitchen rack, I said. I had one made. It fits the aesthetic. He looked at me. Did you measure? Of course I measured, I said. I'm an agronomist. We measure everything.